What's up everybody, Straw Hats Are Cool here, and we are back again with another video. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. Wasn't actually planning on making this video, but for those of you who don't know, yesterday I was playing in PPG's Online Regional. That was held on June 15th. And I was able to make top 32 with the red purple Luffy leader. It's a leader I've been having a lot of fun with. Made a video on it recently saying I think it is a sleeper deck of the format and it has a lot of potential, and I feel like I was able to prove that today by making top 32. We finished at 19th place, and I will have my matchups listed somewhere over here. The deck performed very well. Little bummed we did bubble out of the top 16. We got off to a pretty good start, so I had a chance at it. We got close, but still very proud of how I did and how the deck performed, and wanted to do a quick little deck profile for the deck. I know we are at the end of our EBO1 format, and we'll be soon moving to the OPO7 format. I think this deck still could have legs in the OPO7 format, so kind of towards the end of the video I will give some kind of thoughts and potential adjustments to make for the deck as we move into the OPO7 format. But with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right in. Red Purple Luffy is a 3-life, 6,000 power leader with the ability that says activate main once per turn. If we're at 0 Dawn or 8 or more Dawn, we can use this effect to add 1 active Dawn. Really nice, as our 8 Dawn turn essentially becomes a 9 Dawn turn, and as we get into kind of the card by card breakdown, you'll see some of the reasons why that is so powerful. So the first card we've got in the deck is of course going to be the Straw Hat Searcher herself, the Nami from OPO1, running this at 4 copies. As I said, she's our searcher for the deck, just helping us search out our Straw Hat type characters. So just kind of helpful consistency tool for the deck. Next up, we've got Nico Robin. This is a Straw Hat type character, so it is of course searchable by the Nami. It's a 1-cost 2,000 power character with an on-play effect. It states we may KO up to one of our opponent's characters with a power of 1,000 or less. This is a very important card in the black matchups and can be important in the red purple law matchup as well. The key targets for this are going to be the Rebecca in black. That is the 4-cost blocker, has 0 power, so this is a nice easy answer for that. Because we are swinging big attacks every turn with our leader being a natural 6k, as well as the fact that we play a lot of top end high power bodies, that little Rebecca blocker can be pretty annoying, as it can just easily stop one of our attacks. So having Nico Robin as an answer for that is quite nice. And as I also mentioned, the Bond Clay, another very good target for this, as we are playing a lot of big top end characters with 10 to 12,000 power. Having that pesky Bond Clay to just copy one of those attacks can be pretty frustrating, because even at, an 8k leader at times after playing a card like Newgate, that Bond Clay being able to copy the Newgate and swing 10 is rather annoying. So having a nice answer for that is good. However, I didn't play against any red purple law, so that was not a card that came up, but I still definitely like red purple law, very good deck in the format, so definitely like the Nico Robin at 2. Next up, we got a couple 2k counters. We've got the Jinbei as well as the Usohachi. Neither of these ever hit the field, but they are Straw Hat searchable 2k counters. So that's the main reason they're running them. I know you could run things like Otama to potentially allow your Newgate to get past a bigger blocker, but I value the consistency of having these searchable 2Ks, so that's the reason we're running the Jinbei and the Usohachi. Honestly, I think if I could do it again for this format, I'd probably just run for the Usohachi, as I do think this one could be more relevant than the Jinbei. Easily answered by too many things in the current format, but I wanted to try it out, though. Like I said, neither of these ever hit the field, so it didn't matter too much in the end, just being searchable 2k counters for the deck. Next up, we've got the Zoro Joro from OPO5. Another searchable card. As you can see, we've got a nice lineup of Straw Hat characters here. The Zero Juro is another ramp card for the deck, so just allowing us to ramp up a little bit sooner to get to that 8-9 Dawn turn, allowing us to activate our leader effect and start playing out bigger bodies. Really nice if we're able to go first and play this on curve, as it does put us on the even curve, which is really what we want so that we can, as I mentioned, use our leader effect on 8 Dawn to get that additional Dawn and putting us on 9, which is one of the key numbers or the key Dawn we want for this leader. So really like the Zero Juro. A little bit frustrating, it can be easily outed early, especially against decks like Sakazuki and Gecko Moria with a lot of strong removal options. Even Red Purple Law can be a little hard to play into those matchups. However, you know, it is something that forces them to have an answer for it and forces the removal out of their hands, so that hopefully they're losing the removal options later in the game and are unable to remove our top end boss monsters. Next up, we've got 4 copies of the Bon Clay from EB01. This is the biggest addition the deck got in EB01. Prior to this, if you were playing Red Purple Law, you would often run things like the Hawkins from OP01 or the Jean Bart from Starter Deck 10. But the Bon Clay is just the best card to replace those. Still a 4 cost like the John Bart and Hawkins. However, this one just ramps you an active Dawn, which is super nice. Like we said when we were talking about the Nico Robin, just the fact that it can copy the power of a top-end character is really, really nice. This is one of in the NL matchups, this is one of the most important cards. Helped me win, I believe, both of those games against the NL. Just being able to copy their top-end boss monsters, especially towards the end of the game, it can be difficult for us to close it out because we are just, you know, relying on our top-end boss monsters. But having this cheap character that we can spit out even 2 copies later in the game that can copy something like a Yamato, really powerful in helping us close out the game. Next up, we got 2 copies of the Starter Deck 10 Law. This is the blocker, as well as the one that has the on play that allows us to discard 2 cards from our opponent's hand if they've got 7 or more cards in hand for the cost of Dawn -1. It can be really good late in the game as well, as it's essentially a 3 Dawn play. So long as we're at 9 or more Dawn, we can use the Dawn minus, then we can get 1 back with our leader. So like on our 10 Dawn turn, we play this for 4, we Dawn minus, we get the effect, and then we can get 1 Dawn back, so we've still got 7 active, which is quite nice. This card was really solid into the NL matchup as well, similar to the Bon Clay, as they're a deck that often goes very large in hand size. Also was very helpful in both the Sakazuki matchups. We were able to find the Law and able to just ruin their hand, get some powerful cards out of it. I remember specifically in the NL game in round 7, we were able to rip a Raigo from their hand that we knew they searched, which was quite nice as it was leading into my 9 Dawn turn where I was going to play an Edward Newgate. So having the Law to rip the Raigo they search was incredible. Just very nice card for the deck. I was running it at 3, but ultimately decided to cut it down to 2. And maybe I was just lucky, but we did manage to find it when we needed it. Next up, we've got the last 2K counter of the deck. So we're only running 8 2K counters in this deck. Kind of trying, like, we are a natural 6K leaders, so we're running lower numbers of 2K counters for that reason. Farnosuke, another Straw Hat searchable card, so we're running all searchable 2Ks, which is quite nice. He's got an effect that allows him to get rush. He never hit the field in any of the games I played yesterday, but there was a game where he did almost come down. However, I didn't end up needing it as my opponents didn't have counter, but if they did, I had the Farnosuke as an option to rush for a surprise attack at the end of the game. So even if they didn't have the counter, Frankie was able to have my back and I would have been able to get it that way. So Frankie, I think, is like the best 2K counter for this deck, being Straw Hat searchable, and I do think his effect can be relevant. Like I said, neither of the Jinbei or Usuhachi were ever, like, there was never a time where I even considered playing them, so maybe there are better options for the deck, but I valued the consistency off of the searchability. Next up, we've got 4 copies of the Blocker Queen, a card I'm sure many of us are familiar with, one of the best cards in purple. Blocker, as well as having that effect that allows us to draw 2 trash 1 for the cost of Dawn -1. Again, like we said with the Blocker Law, when we play this on 10, we essentially get to play it for a reduced cost because we can get back an active Dawn with our leader effect, which is very nice, allowing us to still have 6 Dawn. And yeah, just a nice consistency tool. Helps us filter out some of the bricks if we are a little too high on top end. So just a very nice card for the deck. One of the best cards in the deck for sure. You know, not much else to say about Queen though. She's a card most of us are familiar with at this point. Next up, we've got 2 copies of the starter deck for Queen or King as well, alongside the Queen. This card did win me a couple games yesterday as well. I specifically remember, I believe it was round 2 against the Newgate. We had a very close game, very fun one. They were running a bit more of a defensive build, and I remember they had a couple, I think they had 2 Marco blockers as well as a Shariah. However, I ended up being able to have the math win thanks to the King, because after doing a couple attacks, all they had left was the Shariah, and so I used the King to KO the Shariah, and then with the 5 cards in hand and the Dawn they had up, I was able to get 3 10k swings in, and that was enough to close out the game. So very good card. You wouldn't play it as much as you think into matchups like Law and Gecko Moria, as those are decks that run a lot of 4-cost bodies. However, I found that oftentimes in that matchup, you want to ignore their bodies as much as you can, because once you start playing characters like the next card we're going to talk about, which is the Eustace Captain Kidd or your Edward Newgate, you're really not too concerned about their 5k bodies, so you don't want to waste your attacks attacking into their board. You just want to be pressuring their life as much as you can, because once the Kidd hits the board, it's a lot harder for those 5k bodies to get any value. They need to attach at least 2 Dawn to them in order to get an attack in. So just ignoring the board, I think, is the best thing to do, because most of the time those bodies aren't going to be relevant into the late game. If you're in a situation where you don't think you can survive if you don't clear a couple bodies, then of course you do need to attack into them, but 9 times out of 10 you just ignore the bodies. I don't think I ever attacked into a body against any of the Gecko Morias I played. I did lose to the one Gecko Moria, but it was a very close game, and I don't think there was much I could have done. My opponent just had all the outs. They had a couple Ice Age, which were able to clear my board. I think if they didn't have the last Ice Age and my King was able to stick, that would have been the difference between me winning and losing that game. But anyways, the Kidd, 7 cost, 8k, on play and when attacking, got that Dawn -1 to allow us to give our leader an additional 1000 power. So with the natural 6000 power that Luffy has, that does allow us to become a 7k leader. And like I mentioned, in decks like Gecko Moria and Law, having the natural 7k power is insanely valuable, as most of their bodies are 5ks, so it means they do need to attach at least 2 Dawn to their characters in order for them to be getting an attack off. And if they're attaching Dawn to their characters, that means they're not developing anything else on board. So that's really what we want. Next up, we've got 3 copies of the Edward Newgate. Again, very similar to the Kidd, allowing us to buff up our leader. Newgate on his own puts our leader to a natural 8000 power. And if we happen to have a Kidd on the board, that can even go up to 9000 power. However, one thing to keep in mind with that line of play is that you will have a rested Kidd, since you do have to attack to get that effect off, and he's only a natural 8000, so chances are they're probably just going to start attacking into the Kidd as opposed to your 9k leader. But the additional power just for your attack is nice, so more often than not I'll do it just because it does allow me to get an extra Dawn back with my leader effect by doing the Dawn minus. Yeah, I'm giving my leader an additional power, but really in a lot of ways you're still kind of an 8k leader because Kid is probably going to become the target of attacks if you go through that line of play. But again, being able to play this consistently on like turn 4 is absolutely insane. Just like even going first, I said you can very easily play this on turn 4 if you get the Zero Juro out on turn 2, or even if on your 5 Dawn turn you just play Bond Clay, go up to 6, swing with your leader. You're gonna untap on 8, use your leader effect. Turn 4, you're dropping Edward Newgate, and a lot of times that just wins you the game right there, especially against, like I said, decks like Gecko Moria and Red Purple Law. Gecko Moria a little bit trickier because oftentimes they do have ways to remove it, but if you're able to play Kids and Newgates in succession, that's definitely going to be your win con in those matchups. Next up, we've got 2 copies of the Shanks, not a card many people are familiar with from what I can tell, and one that not a lot of people have been playing in their Red Purple Luffy decks in the current format. This is a 10-drop, 12,000 power character, and it has an on-play effect which just allows us to remove a 10,000 power or less character. Really valuable in the NL matchup. In round 7, I don't think I would have won that game without the 10-drop Shanks. We're very fortunate in that we opened with both of them in that game. Remember mulling, or had a pretty bad opening hand and was able to mull into a hand with this, a couple queens. So as soon as those Yamatos started hitting the board, we were able to just clear them one after one. Because we get to 10 Dawn faster than our opponent does, because we have ramp, none of their big bodies were able to get an attack into us, and because they have to spend 8 to 9 Dawn to make their big plays with Katakuri or Yamato, that means the most they're ever swinging into us with their leader is 7k, and that's just not good enough. We can always get out of that with one card. So Shanks really put in work for the event for me. Very big fan of the card. I'm glad I decided to make room for it. Wasn't initially running it, but definitely warranted a spot in the deck in the end. Last character for the deck is of course going to be that 10-drop Monkey D Luffy from OP05. This is the card that makes me love the deck as much as I do. I think it is one of the most fun cards to play in the game. Very unique with the Dawn -10. So you lose all your Dawn. However, thanks to the leader effect, you can get one back on 0, and then you can use the secondary effect of the Monkey D Luffy to get an additional Dawn. This is just like the game-ending card most of the time, especially in matchups like the Newgate. I think both the Newgate's game, this is the card that won me the game. Also really good in the Sakazuki. Just an absolutely phenomenal card. I know it won me my game against round 1 versus the NL as well. Had a big board, was able to go wide, get them to 0, slam down the Monkey D Luffy, do a 7k attack, followed by a 10k, then a 12k attack, and that was good enough to close out the game. So, absolutely phenomenal card. One of the there's a new line of play that you have with the Monkey D Luffy as well, thanks to the addition of the Bond Clay. And I had some people contacting me on Twitter as well as in some of the Discords, wanting to know kind of my thoughts on the deck, which I love. If you have questions, feel free to let me know in the comments below. I love to see people wanting to try out the Red Purple Luffy. But I think a lot of people view this Luffy as purely a card to end the game. You know, you play this and you're trying to end the game that turn. However, there were several games yesterday where I actually played the Luffy on curve. I specifically remember doing this in the last game against Gecko Moria, as well as in one of the Sakazuki games. And I really like this play now, because if you play this on 10, you know, like I said, you play this on 10, you lose all your Dawn, you get one back with your leader, you get one back with the Luffy effect, put the Dawn on leader, you swing 7, you get the extra turn, you untap, you go to 4 Dawn, you can use the effect, go to 5. And because you're on 4 Dawn, you can play the Bond Clay, which gets you an active Dawn, which means you can either swing 7k with your leader, or leave 1 Dawn up for one of your counter events, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And by doing that, you're going up to 6 Dawn, which means after your opponent's next turn, you're going to 8 again, which means you can use your leader effect and play a new gate. So you can, in a way, go 10 drop Luffy, you're Dawn minusing 10, but if you got the Bond Clay, next turn you're playing Newgate again, which is absolutely insane. And being a 10 cost character with 12,000 power, it's probably not getting removed. I mean, of course, decks like Gecko Moria and Sakazuki do have the ability to do it relatively easily, but it is going to cost them quite a few cards from hand, and oftentimes they're just not going to have the tools available when you play it to do that. Plus, you're establishing a Bond Clay, and if you're doing this, like I said, on your 10 Dawn turn, chances are they've got something like a Gecko Moria on board, so this is also a threat. So I really like that line of play. Like I said, it won me for sure the last game in one of the games against the Sakazuki. They'd already used a lot of their removal, so that the Luffy got to stick around. We got to play the Newgate the following turn. Just absolutely insane play. Really like it, and we wouldn't be able to do it without the addition of the Bond Clay. So now we've got some events. We are running 3 copies of the Gum Gum Jet Gatling. 0 cost event allows us to trash a card and get 3,000 counter. Every color has one of these now. I'm sure most of us are familiar with it. Running it 3 copies though, because we are running 15 bricks in this deck between the Kings, the Kids, Newgate, Shanks, Luffy's. We do have quite a few bricks in the deck, so having this as an option to turn those dead cards in hand in the counter is quite nice. And the trigger actually did come up in the last game. I don't know if it was a game-winning play or not, but as I mentioned, I did that play with the Luffy, where I played the Luffy into the Bond Clay so that I could play Newgate on the following turn. And after I passed to my opponent, I did trigger the Gum Gum Jet Catling, which with my leader effect allowed me to go to 10. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I wanted to be able to play Newgate, as well as leave 1 Dawn up for the next card, which is going to be that Radical Beam, just to be safe and extra defensive. Contemplated keeping in my hand, but if I recall, my hand was several 2k counters, so I didn't see a lot of value in keeping this, and I wanted to keep up the Radical Beam once I was, after I played the Newgate. And that's what triggering that Gum Gum Jet Gatling allowed me to do. So the trigger doesn't come up often. You are only a 3 life leader, so the chances of you getting a trigger are significantly less than in any other deck, just because you have less life. But it did come up, and being able to get that additional Dawn was pretty helpful. Like I said, I don't think I actually needed it to win the game. I think I would have won the game regardless, given the position my opponent was in. All they had on board in that last game was a bunch of 5k bodies. And because I played the Newgate, that meant they had to attach at least 3 Dawn to each of their characters in order to go for game, because it seemed like they did not have any defensive plays left. So they ended up going 8, 8, 9, and I had a handful of counters, so that wasn't good enough to get there. But in the event that they were defensive, I wanted to have my defensive option available to me, so having that trigger was important. And the last 2 cards we have for the deck are going to be the Diamble Jambe. Paired up with the 10 drop Monkey D Luffy, this card is an absolute menace. One that I'm sure many of us are familiar with, as it did see a lot of play in Zoro in earlier formats. But being able to, especially against matchups like Black Yellow Luffy, which was not one I played during the event, but this card's absolutely nuts in that matchup, especially alongside the Monkey D Luffy. For those of you who don't know, against the Black Yellow Luffy matchup, they actually lose their buffs on your extra turn if you play the Luffy. So if you're on 10, you play the Luffy, and they're a 9k leader. On your next turn, so the extra turn you get off this Luffy, they're going to lose all the buffs they got, so they're going to be back down to a 5k leader. Unlike Edward Newgate, the text on the Little Brothers from Starter Deck 13 says until the end of your opponent's next turn, and not the start of your next turn like Newgate. They will lose those buffs, so if you play this, Jambay 15 and their 5k leader, if they're trying to wall up with Savos, most of the time that is good enough to close out the game. So, love the Jambay. I know it definitely won me at least one game, just being able to bypass the blockers, but I feel like most of the time it was the Nico Robin that was able to allow me to bypass little things like the Rebecca, because I needed to get multiple attacks in. I think a lot of players are pretty wary of the Diamble Jambay. I know there was one, I can't remember who I was up against or what I was up against, but I know there was one game where I ended up winning because of the Jambay alongside the Monkey D Luffy. So that is the deck list. Be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments below. As I said, I will talk briefly about some of my thoughts on some adjustments to potentially make for the deck going into the OP07 format. First and foremost, the Jinbei and Usohachi. These cards are going to get cut for the new Sanji card from OP07. It's a 2k counter, 6 cost, 6,000 power, but you can play it for a cost of 3 if you have, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 less Dawn than your opponent. And that gives you another good play to follow up your Monkey D Luffy with. On your 4 Dawn turn, you can play the Luffy for 3 because you're almost assuredly going to have less Dawn than your opponent unless you're playing against something like maybe a red-purple Law. So just having a nice little 3 cost, 6,000 power blocker at times is going to be really nice. Additionally, I think King will probably get cut from the deck, and you'll run some copies of the new 8 cost Dragon card. It's an 8 cost 9k with Rush, and on play it allows you to attach 2 Rested Dawn to one of your leaders or characters. So with the Dragon on 8, you can put 2 on leader, swing 8, swing with the Dragon who has Rush for 9, and that's a very powerful play, puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. And if you're on 8, you're actually on 9, so you can even do 9-9, and that's even a little bit better. So I think the Dragon's going to be a good addition to the deck. But I think the bulk of the deck will stay relatively the same, but I think that the 2 big additions the deck's going to get are that new 2k counter Sanji, which I'm super excited about, and the Monkey D Dragon, which I think will probably replace the King. You may adjust some of the ratios on things like the Shanks, the Luffy, Newgates, but as a whole, I think the deck more or less, the bulk of it's going to stay the same. May adjust some ratios. Definitely swapping out the 2Ks, probably swapping out the King for the Dragon. That is my list. So this is what got me 19th place at the PPG Online Regional on June 15th, 2024. So was able to get my Nationals invite with the Red Purple Luffy. Really proud of the deck and of myself. Was going through a bit of a rough streak in the OP06 format where after we got EB01, Reiju basically became unplayable, which was kind of my go-to deck, and I was struggling to find a deck that I really liked and wanted to play into the EB01 format. So I'm happy I found something I liked. It's a little bit unique, and I was able to, make a top with it. So I feel like I always end up playing kind of a weird rogue-ish off-meta deck. My biggest event tops have been with Rob Lucci in OP03, and then I had some good runs with Queen in OP04. I had a really nice run with Red Purple Law in OP04 before he was broken in one of the Treasure Cups, and now we have a nice run with the Monkey D Luffy in OP06 EP01 format. So, like I said, if you have any questions, be sure to let me know down in the comments below. I highly encourage you to try this deck out for what's left of the EB01 format. It's a fun deck to take to locals, and it's just a lot of fun to play in my opinion. But with all that said, that's going to wrap things up for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you all in the next video. Peace.